Good morning, ladies of the Goddess Ascension group. Welcome to part 1 of my masterclass this weekend, which is called the Tina Codes. When you come on this morning, either live or if you come on later on the replay, then do say hello. Let me know how you're doing this morning and let me know what has drawn you to come to this masterclass to find out more about the goddess, the badass, and the boss. I'm just having a little, Beatrice is here. Beatrice, I'm in the Goddess Ascension group, right? I suddenly just had a weird thought, like, am I in the testing group? But no, I'm pretty sure I'm in the goddess group, so that's always a good start. Hi, Beatrice, welcome, welcome. When you come on this morning, you may like to grab a journal, you may like to grab a pen, and you may like to grab a cup of tea so that you can relax into the next hour of this class and extract as much gold from it as possible. And I'm curious to know how much you already know about these 3 archetypes, because I obviously talk about them a lot. And some of you might already feel like you've got quite a clear understanding of how these archetypes work. And some of you might feel like you're kind of quite new to understanding what the archetypes are. And that's why you're here. So just to say, whatever your starting point is, Beatrice, how can you say nothing? I've been talking about these 3 in the goddess group quite a lot. But actually, it's always quite a good thing in a way to approach it as if I'm talking to people who don't know anything about it, because when we assume people know things, sometimes we miss key parts out. So I'm more than happy to talk to everyone on this class this morning as if it's something completely new. So there are 3 different archetypes, which as women in business, as women entrepreneurs, it's super, super important and beneficial to your business specifically to understand how these 3 archetypes work. When one of those archetypes is out of alignment, the whole vampire, the whole business model goes out of alignment. And when all of them are working together with the right energetics, what we are capable of doing in our business absolutely skyrockets. So for me, it's been an absolutely vital and fascinating part of the success that I've had so far to understand how these archetypes work generically and to understand how to make them work for me personally. So Melanie Ann Leyer, who is the coach that I originally got this concept from of these 3 archetypes, maps each one of them onto a verb. So the verb that she maps onto the goddess is the verb to be, right? Because the goddess is all about being in the beingness. So when the goddess aspect of ourself is in alignment, that looks like we are confident to use our voice to express our truth. We are comfortable with all the different emotions that can show up for us and expressing them, whether that's anger, whether that's sadness, whether that's jealousy, whether that's joy. Like the goddess is the adult version of the magical child, right? So as far as the emotional landscape, that's very much the realm of the goddess. She's the dreamer. She's the visionary. She's the one that's the most connected to source. She's the one that gets the inspired thoughts. She's the creative one. She's the sensual one. She's the one that loves to dress up. She's the one that gets lost in her imagination and can write inspired coaching programs just by going walking in the woods alone in the snow and connecting with the stillness of nature, and the codes drop into the consciousness. This is all the realm of the goddess. So we can use the verb to be, because she is all about the beingness, the intuition, the connectedness to the higher consciousness aspect of ourself, the one who receives the codes for whatever soul gifts we are individually destined to bring into this world. Okay? The badass is the doer. Okay? So the badass is the aspect of you that gets things done. She's the one that gets the kids to school on time. She's the one that ticks the things off on the to-do list. She's the one that shows up for work every day and sticks to the schedule and all that. That's the badass. She's the doer. When the badass is in alignment, she is reporting to a boss, whether that is your internal boss or whether that is an external boss, with whom she is in energetic accordance, in harmony. Okay? Because the badass is the one that does whatever tasks the boss deems need doing, right? So if you consider, like, in an external working environment, let's say in a college where I work a couple of days a week, for the badass to feel aligned, i.e. the person who is doing the teaching, in this case me, the badass needs to feel like the boss values her, appreciates her, that there is a fair exchange of energy in the money that is being given by the boss for the work that the badass is doing. Good morning, Vonnie. Good morning, Nula. Welcome, welcome. Nice to have you. Mia Kez, hello. People are starting to come on now, and I've just done the first chunk, but never mind, you'll catch up. So I've already illustrated the qualities of the goddess, which I think you're probably familiar with. But just to recap, the goddess is the part of us that is the beingness. Yeah, the one that's connected to the codes, the spiritual practices, the artistry, the creative impulses, the sensuality. This is all the realm of the goddess. We're now talking about the badass, the one that gets things done. And we're talking about the key importance of the badass having a good relationship with the boss. Okay? Now, many times the boss is an external boss. Yeah? So it's the boss at work, it's the manager at work, it's whoever pays your monthly salary, right? For people on benefits, the government is kind of like the boss, right? They tell you when you've got to go to an appointment with the job centre and all that kind of thing. So they are controlling you in exchange for money. They are directing you to different jobs in exchange for receiving that money. When we go self-employed, we become the boss. We become the internal boss. But if we've never had a conscious or healthy relationship with an external boss, then there's a challenge to begin to work out what type of a boss we want to be for ourselves, right? So for the badass, for the doer, let's use the example of me going to the college a couple of days a week to work as a teacher. For the badass to feel valued and energized, she needs to feel that the boss that she's reporting to cares about her, values her, that there's a fair exchange of money, that whatever efforts she's putting into the working environment that she's in are somehow building something. It's growing something. When the badass feels that all of her efforts are not resulting in anything being built, that's where the badass can start to feel like she's literally just chasing her tail. So the misaligned badass is running around constantly doing things. Yeah, you will notice that aspect of yourself, the aspect of yourself that's constantly running around doing things for other people, predominantly. But if there is not a sense of anything growing from those efforts, if it just feels like you're treading water, you know, that all of those efforts are literally just keeping you afloat, then the relationship between the badass and the boss is not aligned, because the badass, to feel motivated and energized, needs to feel that there's some kind of investment in her growth, right? That she's learning new skills, that she has the opportunity for a promotion, that kind of thing. Where you're in an environment like I am at the moment on the 2 days when I'm in the college, where it feels like the money exchange versus the energy exchange is completely off kilter. Yeah. So the amount of energy that I'm putting into teaching and the amount of expertise that I'm putting into teaching is not mirrored by the money that I'm receiving back, the positive affirmations that I'm receiving back. There's none of that. The working conditions actually in that environment over the last couple of months have actually got worse because we've changed campuses. So we've lost our staff room, we've lost that sense of community with each other as teachers, because we're all working in very, very different parts of the building, so we don't see each other. So it's a really fascinating social experiment for me as somebody who is almost like an investigative journalist around these archetypes, to notice what's happening to the motivation of the badasses, aka the other teachers in that environment, right? What's happening is their motivation is going down day by day by day. Their energy is going down day by day by day. Why? Because the money exchange and the energy exchange is not matching up. Because there is no sense of being valued and appreciated. There is no sense of being able to grow and develop. So 4 of the women who I work with applied a couple of months ago for a team leader position, right? They wanted a promotion. So the badass in them wanted to grow, wanted to acquire more power and responsibility. So this is moving up towards the energy of the boss, right? None of those 4 women were given the job. It was given to a male, an external candidate, and none of them were given a reasonable set of sort of feedback around why they didn't get the job, why they hadn't been successful. So what's happened is their badasses in their day-to-day teaching job, the morale is at an all-time low. Does that make sense? Because there is no sense of growth. There is no scope for expansion. It feels like it was a done deal that this external male candidate was going to get the job anyway. They've not had the feedback to find out how they could have done better so that next time they might get that promotion and they might have that opportunity to expand into new levels of power and responsibility. And that's when motivation starts to really drop. So thinking about your own life, thinking about your own badass, do you predominantly feel like all the things that you're doing are leading to nothing but treading water? Or do you feel that the things that you're doing are actually growing and building something? So to compare and contrast my coaching badass and my college badass, I could spend 2 hours in my free time. For example, on Friday morning, I spent 2 hours doing college admin. So that comes under the realm of the badass, right? Filling in registers, contacting students who've not been attending, doing my paperwork, sending emails. 2 hours of my time doing that. Whether I do that or I don't do that in my free time, my salary stays the same. Very, very low salary. So the badass doesn't have a great deal of motivation to do those things, because regardless of whether my badass does those tasks or not, the salary stays the same. There's no approval or recognition from the external boss, particularly whether I do those things or not. So really it's just for myself, whether or not I feel better having done those tasks, right? But if I spend 2 hours doing equivalent admin type tasks for my coaching, which might look like joining some groups on Facebook with women who are aligned with the kinds of things that I'm talking about and coaching about, and building my network, whether that is writing quality content posts that people read that then helps the people engaging with my work to calibrate to what I'm offering and potentially step into my world, right? Whether I'm designing systems, payment systems, that kind of thing to streamline that side of things. Whether I'm writing terms and conditions so that I feel well, robust and protected in engaging into contracts with people. Any of those types of jobs that my badass does in my free time have a direct potential for growth. Does that make sense? Because when I'm doing those things, potentially I'm acquiring more clients, potentially I'm making more connections with existing clients, potentially I'm putting new work out into the world that ultimately could be monetized. So then the monetizing of my badass's efforts is exponentially higher when I'm working for myself, i.e. I'm my own boss, than when I'm working for the college, which is like a flat, stagnant pond energetically. Is this making sense? Let me know in the comments if what I'm saying is making sense. So it's so important to look at your badass. Is she going round in circles? When I'm doing my college admin, I'm just treading water. I'm not gaining anything. I'm not developing anything. I'm not acquiring new skills. I'm not getting recognition. I'm not getting any bonuses. I'm just keeping my head up here. So I could spend hours and hours and hours every week, every month, every year, just keeping my head above the water. And by the time I retire, I'd have feck all to show for it. Feck all. Okay? Whereas when you start investing your badass's energy, because your badass naturally has energy, when you start channeling that energy in the direction of things that are actually going to bring you wealth, you growth, you creative, expansion, then your badass is energized. In the college environment, my clients, aka my students, don't pay for the courses, right? They don't pay for the courses, the government pays for them. That has a direct impact on their level of motivation to be there because there's nothing on the line. Does this make sense? They haven't invested anything in being there. So now my badass has to work overtime with those clients to motivate them, to encourage them, to inspire them. So I go home knackered because my badass has seriously overdone it. For what? Because, as I've said several times, the salary is very, very basic with no scope for it to increase whether or not I am doing a brilliant job in the classroom or not. Whereas with my coaching clients, because they are paying to step into my world and work with me, inherently they've put something on the line, right? And when people put something on the line to work with you, they've already invested in you, meaning they are already intrinsically motivated to be there, meaning that your badass and their badass are meeting on an equal footing, on an equal energy exchange footing. So the nature of the client will have an impact on whether your badass is being met halfway or not, right? And that's also really important as far as like how your energy is at the end of the day. If the badass is working to build something, to build her own future, to build financial security for the future, to build a legacy, to build a body of work, she will feel energized at the end of the day. But if your badass is working for every Tom, Dick and Harry, whether that's picking up your kids from swimming, picking up your husband's laundry, doing whatever your boss has told you to get ready for the next day, but you're not feeling appreciated, you're not feeling energetically valued, you're feeling like you're putting way more in than you're taking out of the pot, then the badass is out of alignment. And most of us actually lead with the energy of the badass, when in fact we need to be leading with the energy of the boss. Okay, and the badass follows the boss. But the problem is, the badass thinks that she's in charge. The badass thinks mistakenly that she's in charge. So she thinks she's the leader. But very often the badass is a bit like a headless chicken, running around in circles trying to please everyone and trying to get everything done. And at the end of the working day, nothing feels like it's moved forwards. Is this making sense? Mirkez, I really need to reconnect with the energy of movement. I think my badass wandered off due to lack of appreciation. Mirkez, boom. That's exactly right. For the badass to feel energized, she needs to feel appreciated. So what happens when we become our own boss? Very interesting social experiment for me, because this is a relatively new phenomenon for me to be my own boss. So it still shocks me now that I'm like, I can decide when I work. I can decide what days of the week I want to work. I can decide what time of the day I want to work. I can get my calendar out and schedule in months where I just don't want to work at all, or like months when I want to go on holiday, or weekends where I want to make sure that I don't have a coaching program running because I want to go away. Like, this blows my freaking mind that now that I'm the boss, I get to decide all of that, right? This is relatively new for me. In fact, it's very new. And if you think about it, and I had this insight only yesterday, and I think it's gold. If you think about it, from childhood, think of the three archetypes: the goddess, the badass, the boss. Tell me in the comments, which one of those archetypes have we been most encouraged to act from? Which one of the goddess, the badass, and the boss is the one from childhood that we've been conditioned to act from? This is always the awkward thing with doing a Facebook Live. There's always like a satellite delay until someone actually responds to a question. Beatrice, thank the Lord. And Lucy, thank you. Exactly. Exactly. Think back to when you were 4 years old, when you were at school and the conditioning started. If you finish copying the sentences from the board, like the teachers told you to do, you get the clapping seal. Yeah? If you do your homework every night, even though you want to go out and play, if you can force yourself to sit there and write in an exercise book and do all your maths homework, you get the clapping seal, right? If you do the housework that your mum's told you to do, and you hoover your bedroom and you tidy it on a Saturday morning and you change the sheets, you get, yeah, you get the clapping seal. So from when we've been very, very young, we've been conditioned that when we are in badass mode, this gets praised, recognized, rewarded. This is how the school system works. We were not encouraged to question whether the ethics of the boss directing us, i.e. the teacher, the school, the Sunday school, the parents, whoever it is, who was acting as the boss in those formative years, we were never encouraged to contemplate whether they were acting from alignment in the tasks they were asking us to do. We were not encouraged to question the authority. We were just encouraged to be in the responsive, badass mode to external commands. Make sense? Now think about the boss. The aligned boss. The aligned boss holds the power, holds choice, holds responsibility, holds the finances, has creative control, directs herself, can choose the schedule, can even choose, for those of you who are self-employed, who are doing coaching or whatever, you can even choose how much money you pay yourself. How freaking mind-blowing is that? When I'm at the college, 2.5 days a week, no matter what I do, no matter how terrible I am or how brilliant I am, £925 goes in my account, and that's it. No room for any type of growth at all. With the coaching, if I'm brilliant at it, the sky's the limit. The sky is the limit for how much money I can attract. And again, money is symbolic of choice, freedom and power, right? Because, for example, in the autumn, when my badass was in full swing and I was doing back-to-back coaching programs, I amassed a surplus of money for the first time, a surplus of money. Do you know how liberating it is to amass a surplus of money? Thank you, Mia Kaz. It's good to know that my words are landing. It's incredible because when my dad got really poorly in November and I knew that he was dying, one thing that I did not have to worry about was money. This is the energy of the boss. But you have been heavily conditioned to believe that as long as you're treading water, yeah, as long as you're on that hamster wheel and you've just about got enough for the bills and the food and the petrol and the rent, you're okay. So the bar in your psyche has been set really low. The bar has been set really low. Survival. Because the external boss has put a glass ceiling on how much you are recompensed for your energy exchange, no matter how brilliant you are. Massively demotivating. When you become your own boss, you get to choose how much you work, how you work, what the content is that you're putting out into the world, who you collaborate with, what your schedule looks like, what your terms are, what your values are. You get to decide all of it. But when you were a child, did anybody ever say to you, Mia Kaz, Beatrice, Lucy, part of your destiny is to step into your power? Did any parent or any authority figure ever encourage you to step into your own power? No, they encouraged you to bow to theirs. So this whole entrepreneur thing is so much deeper than just putting on a coaching program or organizing dance workshops or setting yourself up as a transformational parenting coach or whatever. It's so much deeper than the content. By becoming an entrepreneur, you are stepping into your power in ways that you've never, ever experienced before. Lucy's saying, I wish that they freaking had. Absolutely. But as we know from the Inner Twins program, we can reparent that inner child using quantum timeline healing. So you can have that conversation with your own inner child, Lucy, and say to her, I know it feels a bit scary to step into power and stuff, but should we give it a try? Should we see how it feels? Should we take some baby steps together? So it's as ever, it's always when we step into a new archetype that's unfamiliar, we always take the inner child by the hand because she will be scared initially until it's the wounded child that will be scared of the power. It's the wounded child that's scared of the power. It's the magical child that remembers the power. Oh my God, that's huge. That's fucking huge. It's the wounded child who's scared of stepping into her own power because the conditioning was, as long as you bow to other people's power, you will not be exiled. You will not be cut off from affection and approval. Yeah, that was the deal. That was the unspoken deal. So to now take that little magical child by the hand and say, but you remember. Because the magical child freaking remembers. She knows what it was like to have a clear yes and a clear no. She knows what it was like to know who she liked and who she didn't like. She had boundaries of steel. She knew exactly whose lap she wanted to sit on and whose lap she didn't want to sit on. She was in her power, and that was taken away. And part of the Goddess, the Badass, the Boss program is all about stepping back in, step by step, yeah? Thank you, Mirkaz. I really appreciate your comments. And Mirkaz, let me see what you said. I want to set the bar higher for my kids. Absolutely. Because when they see you doing it, they get the example. They get the living, breathing example. So that's another motivation and inspiration, isn't it, to be that example for your kids. Lucy's saying she does know. Exactly. That is the original version of you. She was sovereign and powerful and knew her worth. And that's been stamped out of us over the formative years and beyond. And what we're doing now with the Goddess, the Badass, the Boss work is that we are bringing that power back. So the boss is the key, ladies. The boss is the key. Think about why you have disowned your boss. Because the system taught you to disown your own boss. Even your parents taught you to disown your own boss. And you were rewarded for doing that. So now what we're doing together is we are relearning how to step back into that power regardless of how it lands with external people. And that is huge work. Beatrice, only a few days ago, I realised how good I am in following instructions and setting up from others, but so weak in offering myself what I need to follow my inner guidance. Absolutely. Super powerful that you've realised it though. Because the first step to any meaningful change is awareness. Bringing the light of awareness. And that's why I find working with the archetypes so powerful, is that it brings the light of awareness, right, to these different aspects of the self. Now think about the Goddess. Think about when you were a magical child and you were connected with your intuition. Maybe you had cosmic dreams where you saw ancient worlds. Maybe you had the most incredible imagination. Maybe you had, you loved to dance. Maybe you did beautiful pictures. And now think how many times as a child we were told that the picture was wrong, that we'd drawn one of the animals wrong, or that we were too much of a daydreamer if we were in our imagination, or that we had to follow the rules of the school and not go off on a tangent, or we had to do the homework exactly as the teacher said and not use our imagination to do something differently, right? That's how the Goddess, aka the magical child, got crucified. So the Goddess got crucified, the boss got suppressed, but the badass got encouraged. But she got encouraged to work for the wrong boss, aka the wrong authority figures, or out of alignment with her own inner value system. So what you've got now, as the adult women that you are now, probably, is a goddess that's afraid to shine and to follow her own intuition fully, or to create or express fully. You've got a boss who's terrified of being in her power, and you've got a badass that's like a headless chicken running around serving other people without any real vision for what she's creating for herself. Does that make sense? Mia Kaz. It's crazy because a big part of the home education journey has been giving my kids that choice that I never had, to be autonomous. Yeah, that's huge, Mia Kaz. That's absolutely huge. And I know Lucy's done a similar thing. So now let's move to the Tina Turner story, which is the original, or was the original inspiration for doing this masterclass. The Tina Turner story is fascinating because we can see her professional life almost like a tale of two halves, right? There were the Ike years when she was performing with the Ike and Tina Review, right? And there were the post-Ike years where she was performing as a solo artist. Now, Ike is a brilliant representation of the most misaligned boss that you can possibly conceive of. Because he was a boss to her. So he was not only her husband, but he was the boss of the band that she was the lead singer of, right? He was the most misaligned boss imaginable because he gave her no freedom at all. So she frequently in her book refers to herself during those years as a slave, meaning she was completely enslaved to his authority. Now, when the boss archetype manifests in shadow form, it either manifests as the slave or the tyrant. Okay, that's the boss in shadow form, is either the slave or the tyrant. So Tina fell into the slave archetype and Ike into the tyrant archetype, polar opposites, magnetically attracted to each other to work through some deep ass karma, as she says in her book a lot. She felt that that was a very karmic relationship and she had many, many layers of karma to work through with him within the context of that marriage, right? So picture the scene, right? It's the 1960s, the 1970s. The Ike and Tina Review are a super successful band, like a gigging band, doing the circuit, performing in Tennessee initially in their own state, then expanding into the other southern states, then in different parts of the US, then in different countries, right? Hugely successful, kind of like, almost like rock and roll / blues kind of band, high energy performances, incredible choreography. Ike was an inspired guitar player, absolutely inspired. Tina was already, you know, the powerhouse that we know her as today in those early years, hence why he snapped her up, because he could see and feel the phenomenal talent that she had. But what he did, because he felt the need to control her, because he was so afraid that she was going to leave, is that he suppressed her freedom in every conceivable way, right? So Tina's badass in the Ike years was working overtime, literally. They would sometimes perform 4 gigs in a night, right? With no fancy dressing rooms, no makeup artists. They were doing all their own makeup, getting all the wigs ready on the, you know, on the tour bus on the way to the next gig, getting changed on stage, high energy, off stage, next gig. Like, that was next level badass in overdrive mode, right? So Ike set the schedule. So he was the boss of everything, right? So he set the tour schedule, the tour dates, the number of gigs that they did in a night. He did the choreography. He would fine the dancers. He would fine the dancers if they missed a single step. So he was constantly this hyper-vigilant boss looking to find fault with all of his band and all of his performers. If one of the guitar players was a little bit out of time or anything like that, they would be financially fined. He would be physically violent to Tina if she made any mistakes or if she just did the tiniest thing wrong, okay? She was not allowed to do anything except perform every single time he told her to perform. So she was like a performing seal, right? Every single time he said, get your ass on the stage, do your thing, do it full power, that's what she did. So the audiences freaking loved her. They went crazy for her. The success of the band was huge. They had a couple of really big hits. They had River Deep Mountain High that Tina did as a solo artist, actually. And they had, you know, things like Proud Mary, Nutbush City that became big hits. They even got to tour with the Rolling Stones, right? So they became hugely successful. But Tina herself was completely and utterly disempowered and disenfranchised from that success. Ike did not let her have a day off, even if she was like running a fever, she was extremely ill, she'd just given birth. He didn't care. He was like, get your ass back on that stage. So the schedule was punishing and relentless for her badass. He did not let her sing how she wanted to sing. He wanted her to sing in a certain type of way. He did not let her dance the way she wanted to dance. She had to dance how he wanted her to dance. She was not allowed to express any type of opinion whatsoever as far as the schedule, the running order, the backup singers, like all of those decisions, the contracts. He decided every single thing on her behalf. She had no power whatsoever. She was not allowed to have friends. She was not allowed to go to art galleries. If they had a couple of hours off in a particular city before a gig and she wanted to see some galleries, he wouldn't let her. He wouldn't let her practice Buddhism because he thought it was some kind of voodoo. And most importantly and most significantly, he didn't let her have any access to the money. Yeah, he didn't let her have any access to the money directly. All of the money went to him, and she had to beg him if she just wanted some money for grocery shopping. So can you imagine the energetic mismatch here of somebody like Tina Turner, who's already had global success? She's already toured with the Rolling Stones. She's already performed to audiences of like 60,000, 90,000 people. She's done world tours. She's got the phenomenal raw talent that she's got. And she's got to beg someone for money for groceries. She's got to beg someone to let her have half an hour to go to a GP appointment when there's a music rehearsal because she's got chronic stomach pain or whatever. So that's a very extreme example, but it's a brilliant example because it shows you how detrimental it is when somebody's natural talent is being so exploited, where someone's energy is being so exploited, and yet they are not being met with the right financial recompense. They are not being given the time off that they need. They are not being given time to heal after they've had a child. Literally the next night, he was like, get your ass back on the stage. And so he completely controlled her badass. Yeah, he completely controlled her badass. You can't sing how you want to sing. You can't talk back to me. You can't have any opinion about the musical direction that we take as a band. You have no power. He said to her, you will come into this marriage with nothing. You will leave this marriage with nothing. Right? He actually told her that. He actually told her that. Even their home, he was into like very sort of, you know, like quite naff satin sheets, 4-poster bed, like lots of frilly curtains and stuff like that, like quite naff design. And she absolutely, Tina was like, even when she was young, was really into like minimal, very tasteful sort of internal decor. That was one of her passions, was interior design. She couldn't even move a towel without him becoming aggressive to her. He had total control over the home, right? And the home is the realm of the goddess. The Buddhist shrine area that she carved out for herself in her house, in a little tiny corner of the house, she had to hide that stuff in a cupboard because he did not want to see that. He did not want to hear her chanting. He did not want her to go to Buddhist meetings. He repressed that aspect of the goddess. Yeah? The sensuality, her natural sensuality was exuberant, but he forced her to do dance moves that she found very vulgar. He forced her into acts of intimacy that she wasn't consenting to, right? So he repressed her spiritual practice. So this is an example of how the patriarchy at large, mirrored through the archetype of Ike, has repressed women's power, sensuality, authority, and freedom. It's an extreme example, but I'm pretty sure when you feel into that example and you start to look at your own life, you will see in certain subtle ways, or maybe not so subtle ways, how you may have fallen into similar dynamics. I'm going to come to the comments in a second. So the misaligned boss can be a person like Ike, right? Exploiting Tina for every ounce of natural God-given talent she had and giving her nothing but repression and violence and fear in return, right? She even had to borrow money from the backup dancers one in particular used to lend her money when she had nothing because Ike wouldn't give her any money just to run errands and get basic things that she needed, like prescriptions and stuff. She had to borrow money from one of her backup dancers. So one of the ways that he kept her small was complete disempowerment and humiliation. Yeah, like physically assaulting her in front of people, humiliation. So she was completely surrendered to his power, right? Instead of challenging him, she challenged herself. So if he was aggressive to her and because she messed up a dance step, instead of tapping into how completely unreasonable that was, for many years she turned that projection inwards and said to herself, I need to do better. I need to make sure that that never happens again. It's my fault that I missed that step, right? So her badass blamed herself. During that time, because she was so completely disempowered in that relationship, she attempted a couple of times an overdose, right? Naturally, she had loads of life force energy. Naturally, she was a very alive person. But when our life force energy is sufficiently exploited by the wrong boss, eventually we lose a huge amount of life force energy, right? We don't want to give our gifts anymore if we're going to be that attacked, repressed, judged, condemned, deprived of our rightful share of the pie, right? Lucy saying, I so relate to blaming myself too. Absolutely. Again, that's part of the programming, isn't it? Is you turn the blame inwards. The good girl turns the blame inwards. So for those 16 years that she was with him, she was really with the good girl identification, right? If Ike says I need to do better, I need to do better. If Ike says I need to do 4 gigs a night, even though I'm exhausted, I need to do that. If Ike doesn't give me any money, well, that's okay. At least I've got a roof over my head. That's the good girl. I'll just keep doing whatever the boss is telling me to do and keep my head down. And then hopefully, even if he doesn't reward me, at least he won't attack me. Is this sounding familiar? So Meerkaz is like, oh, fuck, my mum was my boss. Boom. Boom. The person who was your boss or is your boss doesn't necessarily have to be physically aggressive. People can control other people in many, many ways with many techniques. It's just that Ike's techniques were very obvious, and therefore it's a really, really interesting reference point for this class. Is like, what does it look like when the goddess is so repressed that she can't even have her little Buddhist shrine in a tiny corner of her own house on show in case the boss doesn't like it? What happens to the goddess when her sensuality is so exploited that she doesn't even want to be alive anymore? What happens to the goddess when her natural God-given talents are being patented by somebody else and she's not getting any financial recompense for her own work and talent? Look what happens. Look what happens when we become so disconnected from our own internal boss. When we become very disconnected from our own internal boss, we become an unconscious magnet for a tyrant. Yeah? So Tina was an unconscious magnet for Ike because she'd gone into the slave shadow aspect of the boss, and therefore she was a point of attraction for somebody in the tyrant aspect of the shadow boss. So that doesn't mean she wanted to be in that relationship. That doesn't mean she deserved that relationship. Not at all. It just means, and she recognizes this herself, it just means that she was a vibrational match for it, right? So Beatrice, I feel so elated listening. Oh my God, that's beautiful, Beatrice. Thank you. That's such a lovely comment to read. It's powerful what I'm sharing on this topic. It's super powerful. And many people over the years have asked Tina Turner, if your life with him was so miserable, if he treated you so poorly, if he exploited your badass this much and repressed or violated your goddess that much, Why did you stay with him for 16 years? Why did you not leave earlier? And her answer was so powerful. You know what she said? She said, I needed to stay in that relationship for as long as it needed for that karma to work itself out of my system. And there was no point leaving that relationship until I had healed the aspect of myself that was a vibrational match for that relationship. Otherwise, I would have ended up in another relationship with the same frequency. Mia cares, I'm still covered in goosebumps, seriously. It's powerful, feels like another key to a door. It is another key. And every time you tune into me, you're going to get new keys because they keep coming through me all the time, you know, like they keep coming through. And when you respond to them in the way that you're responding to them now, and you appreciate them and you understand them and you begin to integrate them, that gives me so much energy. So it's my goddess that's channeling these codes, right? But it's my badass that needed to show up on time today. It's my boss that spent all week on the strategy for bringing myself to this point to be here today and trying to make sure that as many people knew about this class, were excited about this class, wanted to come to this class. That's the boss that holds the strategy, right? So when you become your own boss, you can allow your goddess to flourish. You can support her gifts. You can allow her channel to open. You can attract other people into that vortex and then learn how to monetize it. It's the boss that learns how to do that. All of these archetypes are supporting each other, because when the boss knows how to monetize the gifts, she buys herself freedom. When she buys herself freedom, the goddess has more time to be in the beingness without being a slave to her own business. Because if we're not careful, if we're not conscious, when we become entrepreneurs, self-employed, and we become our own boss, if we're not conscious of the type of boss that we want to be, we can fall into the old patriarchal patterns unconsciously of pushing our badass beyond her limits, not rewarding her, not giving her the time off, not paying her enough. Does this make sense? That when we become our own boss, if we don't heal the mismatch of the patriarchal boss keeping us very little, very small, very controlled, if we don't heal that, we can easily fall into the same patterns when we become entrepreneurs. And then we wonder why we're still exhausted, or we wonder why the energy exchange still feels off, or we wonder why no matter how much work we're putting into the business, the bank balance isn't matching up, and so we've got to keep over badassing, right? When the boss is working really well with the goddess, the badass doesn't need to overdo it. She can have free time. She can go on holiday. She can have time for new creative inspiration to come through. She can play, right? So it's a new type of boss. Exactly, Lucy. I feel like somebody said something a bit earlier on. So Mirkez, you had the big realization that your mum was the boss. Yeah. Just to add a little footnote to that one, think about this one, ladies. The boss can be a person. The misaligned boss can be a person in your life. The misaligned boss can be an actual boss wherever you work. But the misaligned boss can also be things like perfectionism. Perfectionism is a misaligned boss. Because if you suffer from the condition of perfectionism, you will make yourself a slave to trying to please others, and you yourself will never perceive that you've hit the mark, right? You will always perceive that you've fallen short. Therefore, you become a slave to your own perfectionist archetype. Or if you have a limiting belief that, for example, you're never going to be successful in coaching because 1,000 and million one other people are doing it, you are a slave to a limiting thought, because you're giving your energy to that thought. By believing that thought and for scanning for evidence that that belief is true, you are reinforcing that thought and you're giving your power away to it. So a misaligned boss is anyone or anything, both external and internal, to which you are giving your power away. Yeah, that's a really important point. Lucy said, like fawning. Yeah. So when the badass, let's say, for example, one of my colleagues who I think had definitely projected daddy onto our male manager, constantly trying to please that male manager, trying to do extra work, making sure that your files are absolutely perfect when he wants to inspect them. That's fawning, right? That's like, daddy, please love me, daddy. Please praise me, daddy. Yeah. Best case scenario, he's going to go, oh, 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 well done. And you're still going to come home with just about enough money to put food on the table, without any surplus, without any growth, without any expansion, without your own ideas about how the system should work, how the organization should work, ever becoming part of how it does work. Yeah, when you're a low-level badass in an organization, you're not meant to have inspired thoughts about how things could be better, or how the organization could improve, or how different systems could be implemented. And actually, very often, if you work in a college, for example, like I do, or any type of business, if you bring those types of suggestions to your manager, to your boss, usually they will perceive that as a criticism or a judgment, and they won't like it, and they will either put you down in some way or let you know that change isn't possible in that organization because of X, Y, Z. And therefore, anytime your badass in an external organization tries to propose strategies for improvement, which is the realm of the boss, the chances are the actual boss will condemn that in some way to keep you in the lower level of the badass that doesn't think too much, doesn't have too many ideas, but has just enough ideas to do the badass task that she's paid to do. And that's how the system keeps you in that low level of survival mode within the system. Yeah, when we switch over to entrepreneurialism, the entire game changes as long as we understand the energetics of what type of boss, what type of badass, and what type of goddess relationship we want to have with ourselves. Okay? Beatrice is saying, what are you saying, Beatrice? Same for my mum, same for me. So many women being exploited by men. Yeah. Yeah. And the Tina Turner story demonstrates that so incredibly powerfully, right? So when we come back tomorrow, the second half of this masterclass, I'm going to share with you how Tina took a huge, huge risk one night to escape from this misaligned boss, aka Ike, and how that one act of phenomenal courage completely changed the trajectory of the rest of her life, the rest of her career, made space for a relationship with her second husband, which I will talk about tomorrow, because the story of that is just the most beautiful, incredible story of how she could go from such an abusive marriage in the first husband to such an incredibly soul-aligned soul partner in the second is like powerful beyond measure. And all of that became possible because she reclaimed the boss at whatever cost that cost her, by emancipating herself from the false boss, the misaligned boss, in the form of husband number one. Everything in her life changed from that single moment of extraordinary courage to extrapolate herself once and for all from this man who had controlled every single aspect of her life, even to the point that she wasn't allowed to say things without his permission. That's how repressed her goddess was, and that's how exploited her badass was. So tomorrow we're going to find out what was the turning point, how did it change, and what became possible for her in the stratospheric success she had as a solo artist once she had claimed her own boss, once her own badass was working for her own boss, not an external boss, and once her goddess had the freedom to flourish. Okay? So, the task I'd like you to do today And it's very simple. It's just, I want you to feel into these questions, okay? So, number one, who are the shadow bosses in your life? Write it down. Who are the shadow bosses in your life? Is it your mother-in-law? Is it your manager at work? Is it the voice in your own head that tells you that your coaching business is never going to be successful? Yeah? Who are the shadow bosses in your life or in your head who you are giving your power away to? Just journal on it, or just go for a walk and start to feel into the question. Okay? Number two, is your badass, i.e. the part of you that gets things done, predominantly treading water or doing tasks which actually lead to expansion and growth of your business, your entrepreneurial ship, your visions? Like, are you building something? Are you building something in the same way that you'd build a house, where each brick that you put down is contributing to building your fempire? Or do you feel that most of your goddess actions, your badass actions are just hamster wheel, getting the dinner on the table, you know, whatever, but not actually leading to any growth? And the third one, number three, in what way or in what ways is your goddess suppressed? Do you feel comfortable to speak your truth? Do you feel embarrassed to be seen as a sensual woman? Do you allow yourself to sing? Do you allow yourself to express? Do you make space for spiritual practice? Do you feel that your soul gifts, like maybe you have a powerful intuition, but you're embarrassed to talk about it in front of people in case they think you're weird? Like, in what way are you repressing your goddess? So you've got one boss question, one badass question, and one goddess question. I'm going to share a post in the group in a minute. I've done 3 quotes that explain the shadow aspects of the goddess when she's not aligned, the shadow aspects of the badass when she's not aligned, and the shadow aspects of the boss when the boss isn't aligned. So feel free today to use that thread on the next post that I do in the group to drop me any comments about your insights into those 3 questions that I've just shared. And then when we meet back tomorrow, we'll pick up from there, and you can share with me, what did you excavate around those 3 questions? Because that will give us a lot of insight into what needs to shift for you personally to allow this fempire to start to really grow and flourish as it's meant to do. As it's meant to do. So, aho, ladies. It's been really lovely to share these codes with you this morning. Thank you, Lucy. Thank you, Beatrice. Thank you, Mirkaz. Thank you for being here. And whoever catches this later, then say hello. Let me know you were here. Let me know which parts of it you found most helpful. And I will look forward to reconvening with you tomorrow for part 2. So have a wonderful day, and I will see you in the morning. Aho.